Welcome, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers, to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. I'm John Ledyard from pewterreport.com. Scott Reynolds is with me today on the show as we
John, what are we
launch our
talking about today?
We're talking about the offseason. There's no more Victory Monday. There's no more game results to review. No more even Senior Bowl live action to talk about because those events are done. Until the combine, we're going to be talking about what happens with the Bucs this offseason, Scott. We're going to look at each position group. We're going to talk about current free agents, players that might retire on the Bucs roster, what the long-term and short-term solutions for each position group look like in our mind, including today, as we talk about defensive tackles, what a running mate for Vita Vea might look like long-term. That's been long discussed, and we need to designate some time to it on the show, what that could look like. We're also going to talk about draft prospects that could be available to the Bucs, and we have a lot of thoughts on this defensive tackle class, especially after this past week in Mobile. Getting to watch some of them, and then the game on Saturday. And we'll also look at some outside free agents that we think, one or two that might be possible for this Bucs team to be able to land this offseason, because there is increased flexibility after the retirement of, even though, yes, there's obviously the negative of the retirement of Tom Brady, there will be some more cap flexibility once they finish restructuring and rearranging all of his contract. If Gronk retire, if Gronk retires, Sue retires, some of those things will give some flexibility. So we'll talk about all that on the show today.
I think it's safe to say that Buck fans would rather have Tom Brady back for another year than a defensive tackle, whether it be through free agency or the draft, right? I mean,
that's a pretty good guess.
Yeah, that's just my expert analysis kicking in,
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. But look, we can do that also. We're always going to be coming back to that. But as one of the fans said at the top of the show right here, this is the exact type of subject matter we need to be discussing right now. Not any fantasy quarterback trades. Yeah, we have covered the quarterback thing. Scott and I have both written about it. We've done lots of podcasts about it already. We've talked about it in several different shows. We're going to continue to talk about it, and we'll have a positional preview next week when we do offense that we'll talk about next Wednesday. As a matter of fact, Scott and I will be back on, and we'll talk about the quarterback prospect. Hopefully 9 days from now, we know something more, have some type of indication as the combine nears, but we're not going to talk about that stuff as much this week unless something pops up in the news.
I do want to cover those bases. Clarify one thing, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to Blaine Gabbert, okay, listen,
did you get some backlash on the Fab Five, Scott?
There was like 60, 70 comments or something like that. I have not gone through and read them all. Okay. But listen, just to be clear, right? I'm not necessarily advocating for Blaine Gabbert to come here. I was a little bit of a shtick I did last year in terms of Blaine Gabbert, and the Bucs were undefeated, which is true. When Blaine Gabbert appeared in the game, maybe they should have slipped him in for a play against the Rams. I don't know. But in all seriousness, it's not about me opining for for Blaine Gabbert or wanting him to come. It's just literally looking at the facts of the matter. And quite frankly, John, if we didn't have such strong comments from not just Bruce Arians but also Jason Light here on this Pewter Report podcast last February after the Super Bowl, about Blaine Gabbert, I wouldn't necessarily think that he's a viable option, but you and I've kind of talked about it a little bit behind the scenes, just an hour, kind of like figuring out what this team's going to do. And you're right. You wrote about it today. Fantastic column about the Bucs options. Kind of in line, but also I think a little bit forward thinking, looking ahead to 2023. Mm-hmm. I wrote about it in Friday's Fab Five. You wrote about it today, and I think it's safe to say that neither one of us are expecting, a blockbuster trade for Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson deal to manufacture itself. The thing with Russell Wilson is the Seahawks, if they dealt him this year, would take like an enormous salary cap hit. I mean, like a franchise crushing salary cap hit. So I know Russell Wilson might want out of Seattle. But just from a cap standpoint, it would be a monumental cap hit. And then the Seahawks are left with, which quarterback, right? Would they get to replace him? There's nobody on hand right now. It's not even like even the Buccaneers. Right. They have Kyle Trask in the hopper, not for this year, but at least they have a young quarterback that they're developing.
Yeah, for sure. There's no clear options for sure, but there might be something more clear to us by next Wednesday, and we will
Let's
talk
hope
about it at
so.
length
Right.
by then. And we'll talk about Russell Wilson too. I know there will be
Yep.
questions about that, and we'll maybe have some more clarity in 9 days. But I did want to mention before we jump into this defensive tackle preview, positional outlook, offseason podcast that two things have energized me today. One, Scott, is remembering and reading your column about remembering that the Bucks Super Bowl victory occurred 1 year ago today, and so that's the case. Also, this today or tomorrow, like slash today, represents 2 years for me at Pewter Report. So those things energize me. Yep. So I've been excited about that. Those things energize me, and then also I was energized by Celsius because Celsius powers active lives every day with essential functional energy. I've got the sparkling Wildberry. Essential energy. It accelerates metabolism, burns body fat, zero sugar. Scott's got the orange there. These things come in a variety of unbelievable flavors, but Celsius energy drink, what's great about it is not only just the taste, the fact that they can get this taste with no sugar is awesome, but also it gives you the boost without the crash. You can see a bunch of the flavors there. There's so many different ones to try and check out. You can go to Celsius.com and you can use the store locator, find out where they are near you as well. And what's awesome, Scott, is that due to Valentine's Day, don't we have a little special going on?
We do
this week.
Yes.
Yeah. I believe there's a giveaway.
There is a giveaway. Do you have the information about that?
Yes, I do. Okay. Yes, I do. I'll pull it up here. All you have to do to enter, is the link to enter is in the YouTube description. So just roll down and click on that link in the YouTube description and you'll be good to go. And all you need to do is enter is just your name, your email. That's it. And then will have it. That's it. Yeah, it's very easy. It only takes a second and you can enter to win. There'll be 5 winners and they'll each get 1 case of strawberry guava. And that'll be coming up. I believe the next podcast drawing names is on February 14th. Yeah. So this is before Valentine's Day. So make sure you get this done. But right now you can enter that giveaway to win yourself some Celsius. Right. And the strawberry guava is one of the best flavors too. So make sure you sign up in that link below in the in the YouTube description.
Yeah, very much a Valentine's kind of themed flavor, right? When you got strawberries, they kind of, you're thinking about like strawberries and chocolates for the Mrs. and all that. And, but listen, strawberry guava, it is a very good flavor. And it's not too sweet either. You think it would be, but it's really not. It's sweet enough to give you those flavors, but it's not overpowering.
Yeah. Speaking of things that aren't that sweet, Scott, it's the Bucs defensive tackle situation going into the offseason. There's a lot of unrest. Ndamukong Suh and Steve McClendon might retire, and they are the oldest 2 defensive tackles in the league, I believe, this season. So their future is up in the air as they evaluate their options. There's Will Golston's situation, who's also a free agent. We feel pretty confident Will Golston's going to be back. Yeah. He's already made it clear he doesn't have a desire to play anywhere else. Tampa's home, and that's where he wants to stay.
Right.
Makes complete sense that the Bucs would feel the same way and bring him back regardless of the cost. It doesn't seem like anything that would deter them this offseason from bringing Golston back. They obviously love him. He's been a great fit with Todd Bowles. One of those rare cases of a player who was inherited despite not being a star, was inherited by a new coaching staff and actually fit perfectly and ended up being even better moving forward. That doesn't always happen with those guys.
No,
usually it's like, okay, let's get these mid guys out of here and I'll bring guys that I've worked with before. And instead, Golston's end up being a perfect fit. So we can agree that he'll be back, but we don't know what the future holds for Suh and McClendon.
You're right. And I think the thing too is when you look at Ndamukong Suh, right, he's had a fantastic stint in Tampa, right? I mean, you go back to to when he essentially replaced Gerald McCoy, right? I mean, there's a lot of McCoy fans out there that were kind of upset when Jason Licht made that switch, if you will, right? It was a salary cap move to get rid of Gerald McCoy. At the same time, though, John, Gerald McCoy's body was really starting to break down. And the one thing I remember Jason telling me throughout this process is Ndamukong Suh is just an Iron Man. He's never missed a game since entering the NFL in 2010 due to injury. He's only missed games due to suspensions. And you look at his record in Tampa Bay, right? 16 games, 17 games this past year, but he's not missed a game as a Buccaneer. He's been an absolute rock of a player in terms of the stability inside. And you know what? There was some talk about his declining pass rush numbers. Was McCoy the better pass rusher? The problem is with Gerald McCoy is the last couple of years, he's just been hurt. He went to Dallas and got hurt right off the bat. Same thing out there in Las Vegas this past year. I think his career's done. We're talking about Ndamukong Suh possibly coming back, John, at age 35 this year, right? Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, you look at just the sack production, which I think is kind of a bonus for him given his age and given his role in this Bucks defense. It's not really a scheme where the defensive tackles are asked to, to use quickness and beat their guy one-on-one. Sue and Vita Vea inside are more power players. And really, you could even say the same from Steve McClendon and for Raheem Nunez-Roches. They're all kind of power players inside a defensive tackle. But 6 sacks in each of the last 2 years, and then you throw in the extra sack that a sack and a half that Ndamukong Suh got in the Super Bowl. And I haven't seen the drop off in pass rush. This was a player that the last time that he had sack numbers of 6 or more was back in 2015 when he was in Miami.
Right. Yeah, no question. It would be a loss if he decides to retire. I don't think it's a massive loss, but you have to find a way to replace him. That's the big key, right? Like, this is obviously a good defensive line. You have difference makers in Barrett and Vea. You probably have another one on the way, and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. A good offseason is going to be important for him. But on the interior, Golston's been an ascending player in this scheme. Obviously, some of those sacks for all these guys are off the scheme and off the twists and all the blitzes and all that stuff that frees up different people. But Sue had a couple nice one-on-one wins this year for sacks, and he's a good player overall. And the other part of it is locker room, right? We start talking about those kind of things, and you realize Steve McClendon and Ndamukong Suh, 2 of the most respected guys in the locker room. So you have to weigh all of those things, and the Bucks will weigh those things against the costs and the other options they have in free agency. If they want to come back, I think they'll make room for them to come back. I just am not sure that's going to be the case. The other thing I'll say about this, Scott, is that Ndamukong Suh was, like you said, a great free agent signing, and one of the players, along with Jason Pierre-Paul and Ryan Jensen and Shaq Barrett, that came in and helped change the culture. That Jason Licht made those 4 moves and really didn't miss in terms of bringing in guys on the defensive line. But sometimes I think what gets overlooked with the GMs, we talk about those major big name moves and not missing with any of them. That's very rare. But I think what also gets missed is the moves on the fringes that Light's made. Signing a guy like Raheem Nunez-Roches, signing a guy like Steve McClendon, or trading for, I guess I should say, at the point in the season when they did last year, and how they went from they remained the number 1 run defense even after losing Vita Vea, and McClendon was a big part of that, having a guy like that to be able to play in rotation. I think those types of moves by a GM are so underrated. And because he knows the scheme, and you mentioned it before, Jason Licht watches the games from the sideline. He spends so much time with the coaches. So he knows the scheme. And because of that, I think he can go out and find these fringe players who would have been or were cast-offs other places, or, not ancillary pieces other places. He can bring them in and say, I know that what our scheme is, so I can find this perfect player to just plug in here. And Raheem Nunez-Roches is coming off, I think it might be his best season in the NFL. We didn't really talk about him all year, but when he played, he was really good. And they use all these guys. That's important to know too. These guys all play 15 to 20, 25 snaps a game. So this becomes a very important position if they're going to continue to use a deep rotation. But the fact that Light has pretty much gone out and found all players that work since he's been here in terms of defense, since the Chris Baker debacle of 2017, like the last 5 years,
last
he's just
free agent that didn't really pan out for
Ian Jackson in 2017. But since then, it's his ability to find guys that fit this scheme defensively, fit what Todd Bowles wants, and to be able to plug him in, and at least as a run defense, not lose anything, is really encouraging. The question I have for you, Scott, is from the coach's standpoint, almost, who obviously are advising and helping with the acquisition of these players, given Bowles working with McClendon before and so on and so forth. Should that continue to be the focus of adding to this defensive line? At what point do they say, okay, we have Raheem Nunez-Roches, we have Will Golston. Golston's a capable pass rusher. Nacho, it's never going to happen for him as a pass rusher at this point in his career. At what point do you say, okay, if we're losing Suh and McClendon, are we going to replace these guys with 2 cheap run stuffers, which you can probably do? There's a decent amount of those players out there, and they've shown the aptitude to figure out what players work. Or do you swing for the fences a little bit? Do you say, we're going to go upside, we're going to go pass rush ability, even if we sacrifice a little bit of run defense, because we're not paying for a star, we're going to prioritize something like that. I just wonder how they evaluate it moving forward.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, I think they've tried to get, some pass rush, going at the position, right? I mean, Sue, he's not your classic run stuffer. He does have some pass rush ability, but if he's not going to be back, who are some options to come out there and replace him? And I think the thing is when you look at the fact they've drafted a couple of defensive tackles late, none of those guys are here. But I'd like to see.
I can hear you. Did you lose it? I can hear you. We appreciate Chris with the super chat here with the $5 super chat saying last year I spent my birthday in Tampa watching the Bucks win the Super Bowl. Well, thanks, Chris, for that $5 super chat. And we completely agree with that. You're right that Sue is a good pass rusher and has been a good pass rusher, Scott. I think now it's about what about the guys that can win one-on-one, in the meantime, that at some point, like there's a scheme, which obviously has been very strong and good, and they've been able to rack up sacks. But we've talked about it kind of off season when we've done these pods since before even the loss to the Rams. How do you get the more out of the 4-man pass rush without having to scheme up everything for people? One is Joe Tryon-Shoyinka's development. Two is Vita Vea playing more snaps moving forward. Touch on that today on today's show. But 3 has got to be, can you get another interior pass rusher so you don't have to always use JTS there or JPP there in the past? Can you get some more juice inside as a pass rush, especially if Sue comes back? He's another year older, and you're only going to play him a certain amount of snaps. And Nacho and McClendon aren't giving you anything in that regard. And Golston's capable, but there's no other real difference. There's no guy that changes what a defense does or threatens a defense even on those downs. And it's hard to find, but I think that could be part of their priority this offseason.
Yeah, I think so. And playing Vita Vea more, right? He's got to be able to get more snaps in games to be that pass rusher type of player. We saw him get 4 sacks this year. I think, it's not always about the sacks. It's about pressures. It's about getting to the quarterback and affecting him. And you look, he had a sack in the Rams playoff game. He had 4 sacks this year. So he's never been better from a production standpoint than last year in terms of getting to the quarterback. Now you're paying him all this money, John. And even if Ndamukong Suh does come back, I think Vita Vea's got to play more.
Yeah, no question.
I understand that he's a bigger guy. You play in Florida, but at some point in time, you got to kind of take I don't want to say the training wheels off, but I'm going to say it because I feel that way. They've got to get Vita Vea to be more of an impactful player.
What doesn't make much sense is that in the past he played more. Like that's what doesn't make sense. It's like in Tampa, he has played more in past years. So what changed this year? Do they just say, okay, we're going to try and keep him as fresh as possible? To an extent, I get it, Scott, but he became a difference-making pass rusher. I never watched snaps and saw Vita Vea laboring on the field, even when he played more snaps in games.
He doesn't loaf. He's not out there, hands on the hips, gasping for
right. I'm not saying play this guy 85% of snaps like Aaron Donald. I'm saying you have to at least be playing him 70 to 75% of snaps if you are going to justify paying him what you paid him. There's just no way around it. It's one thing if he's good, but you haven't paid him. Once you've paid him, you cannot be playing him 50 or less for a lot of these games. Right. We've talked about it a lot. That can't continue. So that will help.
Yeah.
And I don't think they need a star next to him, but it brings up the question that we've talked about, and we even talked about it last year. We talked about it with Khalil Davis when he was on the team. Could Khalil Davis have become the eventual ideal running mate for Vita Vea? Obviously unlikely when you're that late of a round pick. You're probably always going to be a rotational guy. And he certainly never showed more than rotational ability. But that was kind of the question came up because of that. What's the prototype to put next to Vea? How much do you sacrifice in terms of run defense when you're making those kind of moves? Lots of interesting stuff to consider, I guess. And I think a guy like Grady Jarrett, for example, of a player, I don't even know what his contract status is necessarily. I know the Falcons have to be kind of weighing that. He's not been the same player in recent years. And could he be one of those surprise availabilities? Remember, Jarrell Casey was a surprise availability a couple of years ago, and then ended up getting hurt and ended up retiring after that when he went to Denver. But could that be a situation where he's, Jarrett's not old, but he's a little bit older. Right. He's coming off some down years at a position that isn't necessarily highly valued. What would his situation look like? But he's a guy that can play 3 or nose. Vea can move around 2. They can find some matchups, and Jarrett has that pass rush juice while still being a capable defender. So there's some a sweet spot of a couple players that might be able to give you both. But then once you start moving in either direction, if those guys are off the table, then you start looking at options and saying, okay, this guy's more of a pass rusher than a run defender. This guy's more of a run defender than a pass rusher. There's usually a pretty clear line. Not many guys give you both like a Vita Vea can. And even Vea is more of a run defender.
No, you're right. And I think the thing, John, is they try to get with Khalil Davis, a guy who was a little lighter and quicker and more athletic and twitchier. But at the end of the day, the reason why they let him go is because he just couldn't win like they wanted him to against the run. In this team, right or wrong, Todd Bowles, this scheme prioritizes run defense at the defensive tackle position over pass rushing ability. And drives like an old Buccaneer defensive tackle like Warren Sapp crazy because he wants to see that quick penetrating, 3-tech, one gap style of defensive tackle, because that's who he was. That's who the players of his era, the Leroy Glovers, the Keith Millards, the John Randalls, those defensive tackles that back in the day when there were things like, 5 and 7 step drops, John, where they could get 12, 14, 16, 20 tackle or sacks, in a season. Aaron Donald can do that, but really nobody else can because they just don't have that supreme athleticism to get to the quarterback with so many of these quick throws, these, 1-step drops, 3-step drops, and the ball is gone. But I think that the aspect about, about this is the pass rush, the sack numbers come from the outside linebackers and from blitzing linebackers. You mentioned Grady Jarrett. I think that's really kind of like, splitting the hairs. I think that's a player that has shown he can stuff the run and get after the quarterback. And there's a couple guys, Fletcher Cox, maybe if he's still in his prime, that type of player. Geno Atkins, even though he was a touch undersized, was stout against the run and could get to the quarterback. I think what we're seeing, John, in this year's draft class, and certainly last year's as well, was kind of deficit at the defensive tackle position because the college game has evolved so much that teams aren't running the ball as often. You're starting to see the trend reverse itself a little bit, but there is so much spread in college football that you would have these defensive tackles that were really like 260, 270 inside so they could generate some sort of pass rush. There wasn't the need for the run stuffing defensive tackles. And the guys that were didn't really develop as pass rushers because the ball got out so quickly with the spread and in the RPO game that they didn't have a chance to really put up the sack numbers and get up the pressures and really develop. So I think that the defensive tackle position, it's not dead like the fullback, right? You're always going to have defensive tackles.
For sure.
But I just think that you don't see the quality and the quantity of the position because the college game has changed so much. You're just not spitting into the league these really premier pass rushers that are, worthy of top 5 picks. Like you with maybe Derek Brown was the last one.
I mean, he was a top pick, but again, he's disappointed. At one point this year, they even benched him. That's been a problem too. That class was billed as having 2 premier guys, and Brown has been a disappointment, relatively speaking, and Kinlaw has been injured constantly, who I think would have been a total difference maker in the NFL. But now when you spend most of your first 2 years injured, it's hard to come back from that. It just track record shown us. Maybe he still does. Obviously, you still hold out hope, but it just we had this great class, a while back, obviously with Christian Wilkins, and has been a good player for sure, even if he's not a great passer. Jeffrey Simmons has developed into a really good pass rusher. That took a year or two. Ed Oliver is a good player for sure, even if he didn't necessarily, people used to talk about him as the number 1 overall pick. Dexter Lawrence is a good player. Greg Gaines is a good player. There's been some good players. I just don't know that it's been, Quinn Williams, obviously, but since that class, it's been completely downhill. I mean, you look at the last 2 classes and it's been really brutal in terms of top end talent. I mean, you even look at PFF grades, even if you don't totally trust them, just look at guys from the 2020 draft class who play interior defensive line. Rashard Lawrence, who barely plays for the Cardinals, is the highest graded guy. Derek Brown's below him. He played 600 snaps this year. The only guy this year to even play 600 snaps that was in that class at defensive tackle is Derek Brown. He's been a disappointment. Everybody else is a part-time player from that class. And then we know about 2021. Christian Barmore had a decent grade for PFF, but only as a pass rusher. As a run defender, he was terrible too. So it really has been a struggle to find these guys in recent classes. I will say this, Scott, I don't think this class, like last year's class, honestly, like the top guys we're talking about is Barmore and Davion Nixon, who's like barely played this year. I think he got hurt too and ended up being like a day 3 pick. Who else? Levi and Wuzurike, who
yeah.
I talked to a Lions guy that was like, would not surprise me if they cut that guy. Like,
Yeah.
like that's how bad he was as a rookie.
Yep.
So like bullet dodge, because we talked about that guy a lot for the Bucks last year, I remember. But those kind of guys were the top guys. And I watched all of them and I was like, they're either going to get it in the NFL or they're going to all bust and be like out of the league.
Right.
And some of them could be headed in that direction with Nixon and on Wuzurike. We'll see.
Yeah.
But this year, I don't think that the floor is as low for these guys in this class. Like these guys are going to play in the NFL from what I see from the top guys. And we'll talk about a couple of them in a second. But last year, I just felt like not only were none of the tape great and none of the like stuff you heard that great about them, but then there was also like this, just they could be disasters in the NFL. They could be straight misses. This year, I see a much higher floor. I don't know if there's anybody with star potential. Like you get into some of the guys in this class, Travis Jones from UConn, who we just saw at the Senior Bowl. Big, powerful dude who will stop the run. He is not going to be a super big liability. And same with Jordan Davis from Georgia, although we'll talk about him for a second, why I think the value's out of whack on him. But there's some guys like they just have higher floors. They're going to be players in the league. I have no confidence. You're not going to necessarily hate the pick, I think, unless you take him super high. But the question will be the value. Do they give you the value? Because I don't know if I see a lot of passing downs difference makers in this group.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that kind of speaks to my point too, just that you don't have the guys with the pass rushing resumes. And part of that is just what they're facing in college football with so much of the quick passing game, the RPO, the screen game, where the quarterback's literally taking one step out of center or in the shotgun and just throwing the ball down the line of scrimmage. And so that therefore, when you see a guy like Travis Jones from UConn, who I thought had a pretty good showing at the Senior Bowl and was on a really, really awful UConn team, right? But this is a big 325, 326.
328. I think he came in the Senior Bowl, which I bet that was trimmed down a little bit for Big Boy.
He's a big guy, right? Big, thick guy.
And he's not sloppy. Look, I mean, you can see the weight distribution there. Like even Vea, he carries a lot in his gut. He's a little bit stouter, shorter. Jones is just huge. I mean, he's over 6'4". Yeah. He's just a massive dude. I stood and talked to him. You get a vibe from 2 minutes of talking to a guy. You hardly know who they are, but I got great vibe just in terms of intensity, demeanor, looking in the eye, like not messing around, that kind of vibe from him that like, I asked him straight up. I was like, have you felt like you've been physically challenged at any point in your career? He's like, nope, not yet. And he meant including the Senior Bowl. So, and it was obviously the Senior Bowl. He did there were a couple good reps against him. He's got a lot to figure out in terms of pass rush repertoire. But just watching him at the Senior Bowl, I haven't seen his tape yet. I don't know what's going to tell me based on him playing AAC competition. But just watching him there and then watching tape of Jordan Davis, I'm not sure I would take Davis before him just yet. Like we have to pump the brakes on Davis a little bit. And I say this, and we'll talk about Devonte Wyatt too, because people are asking about him in the chat, and we'll talk about Devonte Wyatt because I like some things there. But Davis is being talked about like he's not going to be available for the Bucs. I think he's going to be available for the Bucs. Like I think he's going to be in that range, Scott, because this is a guy that has not played. I mean, this year was the first year he went over 300 snaps in a season in his college career, and he didn't hit 400. So like he still has barely played football, and he's a nothing on passing downs. I mean, I think he has 8 pressures this past year, and how many games they play? 14 games. I mean, he just a complete hero on passing downs. Like you can watch him when he plays on passing downs, it's nothing. Like I don't know if it's the energy that's there. He loafs sometimes when he's on the field. I don't know. Again, that could be just like what they're asking him to do is just contain the pocket because you're not really an upfield guy and you have this huge wingspan. There's no question he's a good run stuffer. He can move people. In terms of his gap, he is not going to get blown up very often. Double teams just die on his body. Range and ability to penetrate and make plays, a lot of plays behind the line that, he'll be a good player. He'll be a starter for somebody, but it'll be in a rotation, I think. And I don't know that a lot of teams are going to see a first round value in that.
I agree. And the thing is when we talk about, we complain about Vita Vea playing 45, 50% of the snaps. I mean, that's really what Jordan Davis did at Georgia. I watched a ton of Georgia football over the last, I've watched Georgia football the last several years. My wife's a Georgia fan and I've kind of been a fan of the team too. So I'm up on all the Georgia guys, and I wanted to come into this season liking Jordan Davis, more than I did, because I thought, okay, he's staying for his senior year. He's coming back, and he's he's going to be even more impactful this year. And honestly, it was Devin Carter, number 88, the sophomore, who was the best defensive tackle, in my opinion. Then the next best defensive tackle was Devontae Wyatt, right? Mm-hmm. And then Jordan Davis in that order, right? And so I'm with you. I don't see the first round grade on Jordan Davis because of his limitations for two reasons. Number one, it's he just doesn't have much of a pass rush. It's literally, if he's going to win, it's going to be taking a guard and driving him back into the quarterback. And yes, we saw Travis Jones do that at the Senior Bowl for a sack in the game. And that's it. Listen, that's how Ndamukong Suh gets some of his sacks, and Vita Vea too. There's nothing wrong with the bull rush.
I saw Travis Jones try to use pass rush moves, Scott. Right. I saw him. I mean, like he's never going to be like a big sack impact guy. But if he can get to even where Vea's gotten to, where Vea can rip under and swim somebody, you know what I mean? Like then, and Jones is huge, and I think that potential is there for him. I'm not sure it's there for Davis. I mean, Jones played double the amount of snaps Davis did this past year. Like, can Davis even hold up if you ask him to play more? He hasn't done it. I know they play in rotation there. His energy level on passing downs doesn't indicate that he can at the next level. I just don't know.
I don't see the mobility either. I think he is such a phone booth type player where at least with Jones, and I saw him actually chase down, I think it was Sam Howell in the game where he was going from left to right and he was actually in pursuit. And I thought, wow, big man's got some wheels. He didn't really make the tackle or anything, but he kind of escorted the quarterback out of bounds. And Vita Vea's got some mobility too. You'll see him chase down a screen. You'll see him, fly to the edge of the defense and be active and run support that way. I don't see it with Jordan Davis. And again, he's got the size, but the thing is if Vita Vea is going to be the nose tackle in this defense, and sometimes they'll play, almost like a double B gap style, especially in nickel rush situations. But if you're looking for that A gap guy, that's Vita Vea, right? And then you're looking for a B gap player, that 3-tech in Todd Bowles' defense, and that's been Ndamukong Suh. I think Travis Wilson can do that, according to Pro Football Focus. When looking at where he lined up in the A gap on 110 snaps last year, but in the B gap, 469 snaps. And again, like you, I don't have a whole bunch of UConn footage. I think I only have one game taped because UConn's just not on TV that much. Yep. But I think that he has the mobility to at least kind of play the B gap where I don't think Jordan Davis can. I think he is strictly an A gap, eat a double team type of nose tackle. And the Bucs are
weird. Yeah. It's weird because Davis played more snaps in the B gap at Georgia than the A gap, but I agree with you for the NFL for sure. Different beast, totally different, just playing outside the SEC. And you could see Davis, I mean, he was great on rundowns. I'm not trying to totally diminish what the guy does. Like, there's no question. I mean, Alabama ruled the day. Like, he moved some people, no question. I really like his game. I just like it properly valued. And some people talk about him like he's
limited in terms of the snaps that he will play, because unlike Vita Vea, I do think conditioning is an issue with Jordan Davis.
Yeah, it could be for sure. And we'll find out a lot about that throughout the process. Mark, I don't know. We appreciate this question, Mark, and the donations too that you always send in our way. Yes, I don't know, but for our free agents, is the transition tag a viable option as well as the franchise tag? Good question, because some people kind of forget, even myself, I kind of forget. So here's the definition of transition tag. The transition designation is a 1-year tender offer for the average of the top 10 salaries at the position, as opposed to the top 5 for the franchise tag. It guarantees the original club the right of first refusal to match any offer the player might receive from another club. But even if they decide not to match, you won't get any compensation. So you don't get any comp picks or anything like that if the player decides to sign elsewhere and leaves your organization. So that's just kind of a reminder about the transition tag. It's rarely used by any NFL teams, and I don't expect the Bucs necessarily to use it. They want to sign long-term, and they want to make more long-term investments and have more cap flexibility because of that with players like Chris Godwin or Carlton Davis, even to Jordan Whitehead if he were to return. And by the way, some of these options might be on the table more if they do end up, we don't have to sign a 1-year deal with Sue and with Gronk and with Brady, and we don't have Brady for this year. Like, those guys were all going to be 1 year on the last year of their deals. Those options aren't on the table. Those older players okay, we'll invest more in Whitehead and Kappa and some younger players who will keep more of that young nucleus around. So that could be an option. We'll talk more about that
John,
as we get.
The crazy thing is, a couple of months ago on this podcast and on our stories on PeterReport.com, we were talking about what's it going to cost to re-sign Gronk? What's it going to cost to re-sign AB? Right.
Right.
I mean,
and now there's a lot of those 1 year things aren't on the table anymore, and or
Right.
might not be on the table. Yes, which changes a lot because now you don't have to worry about as much. Like before, it was like those 1 years you almost had to use more dead cap
Right.
because you couldn't soften the blow this year without doing that because there weren't more years to spread it out. Now that you don't have that, although you'll probably be a worse team in 2022, it gives you a lot more flexibility to be a really good team in 2023, 2024. If you can hit on a couple, if you can bring those guys back and then hit on a couple, the young guys, and then hit on a couple fringe moves and a couple draft picks before then.
Yeah. So and we're not trying to ruin anybody's Buccaneer fan experience by throwing out a scenario where it's like Blaine Gabbert and Kyle Trask and all of that. But if the Buccaneers, John, if they're not committing $20 million a season like they did to Jameis Winston in 2019 and $25 million a season like they did for these past 2 years with Tom Brady, there will be some cap ramifications, right, with Brady. But what I'm saying is, if you're not committing that quote unquote starting quarterback money, then it can be a situation where you can have more cap room to keep some players like a Jordan Whitehead, like you're talking about, and certainly have money for Carlton Davis and Chris Godwin. You and I both think they're going to come back regardless. Right. But really what it is, it's continuing to build the roster around the quarterback position and not force it, like you mentioned in today's article, John, which was a really good one on PeterReport.com.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right.
At the quarterback position.
Right. Yeah. And we'll talk more about as it pertains to each of those position groups as we go through the next 2 weeks and look at each of those groups. But the big thing, to focus on is that, like, remember 2023, that cap is going to go up again. Right. And the Bucs are not the Saints or Packers. They are not over the cap, or the Rams. They're not over the cap. They're already under it, even with the moves they made for future years, because they don't have that much money tied up in future years, unlike those other teams. So they have the freedom to be able to do some of those other things. Also, keep your eyes open. I think a Mike Evans contract extension could be on the table for the summer. Lock him in for his Bucs career in Tampa Bay, and that'll give you even more flexibility to work with as well, depending on how they structure it. So we got to talk about this because everybody's asking about it. Nate Pitt says, I know y'all are talking D-line, but I just read that Kyler Murray removed all Arizona content from his IG and reshared a story from Mike Evans catching a pass from him in the Pro Bowl. What's going on? I actually didn't. I thought everybody would just assume this was a joke when I saw like Trevor and Zach Blobner and those guys like tweeting about it today. But we are leaning all the way into it, apparently, and buying this. I have no idea what's going on with Kyler Murray's Instagram. I'm pretty sure he also removed all pictures of his family. I don't know if that means he wants to leave his family as well. We'll see. So I'm not reading anything into this necessarily with Kyler Murray. It's just is what it is at this point. And maybe he's revamping his IG or something. I really don't know, but I can't comment on any type of trade situation with them and the Cardinals. But it would be funny because I'm sure he'll get asked straight up about it, and knowing Kyler will be like, what? That super deep voice that he has.
and listen, I think we can kind of say right now, not exactly a perfect scheme fit for Bruce Arians. Right.
I mean, it's definitely not Bruce Arians' physical prototype at quarterback for sure. Kyler obviously is a cannon of an arm and can make every throw. But again, you talk about a guy that invites pressure and would be the anti-Brady because he's so deep in the pocket all the time. It would be chaos. But
he's 5'10"?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, he's small, no question about it.
Russell Wilson's one thing at 5'11", right? You have Kyler Murray, who I think loves to operate out of structure even more than Russell Wilson does behind the offensive line. So
right. I think you and I both we've talked about Kyler before. I definitely love the talent. I mean, some of the throws he makes are unbelievable. Some of the plays he can make are unbelievable. The consistency is everything at quarterback. And until you can find that, obviously he's good. Can he be great? Right. I don't know. But anyway, I don't think that's.
He certainly wasn't great in that playoff.
Harvinder's it's breaking news. Murray just posted an image of the Bucs flag on his Instagram. I'm joking. Oh, I love it. I love the offseason, man. The intrigue is just at an all-time high. All right, let's get to the draft guys and then the free agent guys that we both like, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead. Talk about the draft guy that you think could be of interest to the Bucs. I can't remember who you told me before the show started.
Well, it was Travis Jones.
It was Jones. Okay, we talked about him at length then.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah, and he's a player that played 2 seasons at UConn. He actually 3 really. 2018, he had half a sack, 5.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. Didn't play during the COVID year of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Came back last year, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. So he's a good mix of what I think the Bucs would be looking for as a player that can get to the quarterback, push the pocket, but also just be that power player against the run that Todd Bowles loves. If you're looking for a free agent, there's a player that I really liked at the Senior Bowl a couple years ago, and that's B.J. Hill. Plays for the Bengals. You might have seen him pick off Patrick Mahomes in the championship game. And this is a player that started his career with the Giants, still 26 years old. They just traded him to Cincinnati. I'm sure the Bengals would probably like to re-sign him. He's an ascending player. Had 5.5 sacks for them.
Keep this in mind with the Bengals. They just re-signed. They just signed DJ Reed money and Trey Hendrickson huge money.
Can't afford them all, right?
Yeah.
But this is a player that at North Carolina State was a pretty rock solid guy against the run. His pass rush is coming on. He's got 13 career sacks, had 5.5 as a rookie. The pass rush production just wasn't there in New York over the last couple of years, but it's kind of shown a bit of a resurgence there. At 6'3", 303. He's not the biggest guy. He's not, like a kind of a monster like Ndamukong Suh as you see him there with the ball number 92. He's built a little bit longer and leaner, but you see the arms and the thighs, right? He's a solid dude. He's well put together, and I think that he would be an ideal player. We kind of talked a little bit, John, about needing that B gap run stuffer / penetrator on run down or on passing downs. And I think B.J. Hill is coming into his zone now. He's a very young player. I'd love to see them have 2 young defensive tackles, a 1-2 punch inside with Vita Vea. And you look at B.J. Hill as just 26, he'll be 27 a couple days before my birthday in April 20th. I think that he would be a player that could intrigue the Bucs and might be worth investing in.
I love this, Scott. I'm all about this move. BJ Hill is a stud. But the cost is realistic. I think he's a good fit. He's versatile, 1 technique, 3 technique, can move around. He gives you a little bit of everything. He's kind of like a good combination of there's more pass rush juice there than anybody not named Vea that was with the Bucs in the inside last year. But he's going to give you good run defense too. He's youth is there. It could be a great fit in terms of the scheme too. I think I love it. I hope that they consider it. I don't know what the cost exactly is going to be. He is coming off a really good year. And obviously it's
win the Super Bowl, right? You're going to get that little Super Bowl bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, no question about it. But you have really good player, and I think everybody likes to talk about it. Just character, personality, everything. It checks the box for BJ Hill. So yeah, really good underrated player. We'll see what the market looks like for him as he hits free agency. Speaking of the market, there's a way that you've got an opportunity to put away a little bit of money for yourself on the market, and it comes from our friends over at Immuni Financial.
At Amuni Financial, we help you live in the now.
Congratulations. We're so happy for you.
Thank you.
And even though the now may feel very different, you still need to plan for the future.
How's retirement treating you?
Oh, just fantastic.
I know I say it all the time, but you really got to come up to Colorado.
Let's do it.
All right.
We can help you develop that plan to keep you on track so you can still prepare for tomorrow, today. Amuni Financial. Plan ahead, stay ahead.
John, I just got some numbers from my friends over at Immuni Financial with my portfolio. To say I'm happy is an understatement. Listen, managing your family's wealth means more to Immuni Financial than simply allocating your assets. It means legacy planning, brokerage and advisory services, retirement accounts, college savings accounts, and insurance services. With over 40 years of experience here in the Tampa Bay area, let Immuni Financial help you plan ahead and stay ahead. Do what I did. Call Immuni Financial for a free, no risk, no obligation financial sit down and tell them what your dreams are. Tell them what you want to save money for. Tell them, how much money you're looking to earn with their investments to get you to retirement or to help pay for your kids' college savings. Give them a call at 1-800-868-6864 or visit amuni.com.
Great stuff from our friends at Amuni. Some people are asking about a BJ Hill contract, what it could look like. I'm going to try and look that up. I know our boy Brad Spielberger's got a projection out there somewhere on Pro Football Focus, so I'm going to try and get a hold of that and see kind of what that might look like for him. By the way, for people wondering, I know about Chris Godwin. He is Pro Football Focus's number 3 free agent. They think Pro Football Focus believes, and they are very dialed in. Brad is super dialed in, because some of the stuff he's told us recently, Scott, has come out exactly true. But they're thinking about, for Chris Godwin, maybe $17.5 million per year for 4 years, $70 million. So that would be very good for the Bucs if that's his market. I think that's not stretching them too much, I believe. So something to consider there when it comes to Chris Godwin. So we'll keep looking down and out with COVID. Robert says, and Andy sends a $5 super chat. Wow, even with COVID. Thank you for keeping my mind occupied with great content. Keep up the good work. We appreciate it, Robert. Hope you feel better soon for sure. No fun at all.
COVID myself a couple 2 weeks ago, really. So thankfully it was the mild strain. Lots of fluids, lots of rest, vitamin D. Get some zinc in you, and hopefully you feel better, Robert.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the super chat as well, Robert. We'll try to see if there's some of their contract projections are pretty interesting because they think Carlton Davis is getting the franchise tag. So they haven't put necessarily a total out there. So we'll look into BJ Hill too. But my free agent, I was thinking more along like the cheap and affordable signings before. I was thinking when the Brady era was there, it was like, who can you sign, that might help you in terms of the short term. But I really like Calais Campbell at that point in time. I mean, he's still a guy that is playing at a really, really high level. Yeah. He gives you flexibility.
He played for Bruce Arians out there in Arizona, right?
Exactly right. And you need to replace some leadership. And he's one of the best dudes and leaders in the NFL at any position. So you need to replace some of that if guys retire too.
You're right. And John, that's one thing too that I think bears about 10 seconds worth of mentions. When you look at Ndamukong Suh, right? And and him coming to Tampa, he was a menace for opposing quarterbacks, right? He had this reputation as a guy who was, kind of an ass kicker and all of that, but kind of a nasty guy as well. But you know what? He wasn't nasty to his teammates. They love him. They absolutely love him. He is a tremendous leader. And I think that he came to Tampa, really kind of resurrected his image a little bit. I don't know if he fit in quite well in Miami. He was only out at
the Rams.
It was only out in Los Angeles for a year, out there helping them get to the Super Bowl. But you cannot find a Buccaneer player that doesn't just revere the guy, right? I mean, he has been just in lockstep with Levante David from day one. Those guys, have a past, of course, but it's just a great locker room fit, and really has just brought a lot to the defense from a leadership standpoint, rather than just on the field play.
Right. No question about it. And that's an important thing that they'll want to try to replace, obviously.
That's a great mention with Calais Campbell because he really is that type of guy as well.
Yeah, exactly. It could be. But again, if you're looking at longer term deals, or you're like, okay, let's invest more for the future rather than go all in 2022, maybe he doesn't make as much sense. He's older, but he hasn't played a ton of snaps. So maybe Daquan Jones, who's been a good rotational player in his career, Tennessee, Carolina, good ability to still rush the passer a little bit, but also a run stuffer. He's a name I'd consider. And then if you're looking for 27 years old, DJ Jones from San Francisco is a really good player, plays in rotation in San Francisco, but stuffs the run, is developed as a pass rusher, would be a Bucs prototype fit, I believe.
Last year, it's a career high for him.
Yeah, he's really come on. He was a player I loved coming out of college too. He was one of the sleeper picks and one of my guys coming out. So I really enjoyed him. And but there are some guys in free agency that can be acquired here. That's a good group. It's a better group than last year's free agent D tackle group was. And so there are some options, even like a Tim Settle from Washington has been in rotation. He's been a solid player quietly. And I wonder what happens with him if he's able to be somewhere that stays on him and keeps his weight down.
That was a player that the Bucs were a little high on during the pre-draft process. Then
I'll never forget his combine, Scott. Yeah, you remember his combine? They came in first round pick. This guy's a beast all day. He was getting so much hype. I mean, he didn't do a drill without falling over. It was unbelievable. I mean, Trevor and I still laugh about that to this day, but that was an unreal workout. But then to his credit, he got his weight down, transformed his body in the NFL. it looks like a totally different player since he got to Washington. Obviously, the defensive line coach is there, unbelievable, and they developed him great.
The people in front of him too, right? You've got Hand and you've got Jonathan Allen, right?
Allen and Payne, Payne and Ioannidis as well.
Yeah.
So he's had a great group to play with. So.
Right, and it's also kind of hard to get some playing time when you've got Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen in front of you as well, right? I mean, that's you know that's a tough lineup to crack. But maybe he's looking for some more playing time, and again, I think that's a young player that is a little twitchy and athletic when he's coordinated and not stumbling.
Yeah, when he's not playing way heavier than he should be. There was some talk after that workout that Virginia Tech made him gain a ton of weight, and he was not playing at the weight that he should be playing at. And then once he got that weight down and got some good coaching, he really looked like a totally different player. And he's flashed a bunch when I've been able to watch them. So he'd be another name. So there's a couple names in free agency. Let's close it out with thoughts on just a couple draft guys that we want to consider, maybe other than you mentioned Travis Jones. You kind of got that covered. I really just quick want to touch on Devonte Wyatt right now in this class. I believe we're only talking about early round guys at this point. Later in podcasts, as we get close to the draft, we'll talk more about late round guys and, kind of fallback options and developmental options, stuff like that. Right now, I think it's Jordan Davis and Devonte Wyatt from Georgia, Travis Jones from Connecticut. Those are probably the guys that are in the first round conversation. We'll see about a Logan Hall from Houston. Yeah. Then as you go down, Perion Winfrey from Oklahoma, Fedarian Mathis from Alabama could be options. DeMarvin Leal is going to be really polarizing. He's undersized. I know you're not a big fan. Right. PFF's not actually really likes him, I think. Other sites do not like him at all. Yeah. This past year was a big step in the wrong direction from him from what I've read. Agree. So I got to watch him more. But those are kind of the names that we're considering and weighing right now. To me, Wyatt's interesting because he can play all over. He played a little bit more than Jordan Davis did. Energizer Bunny type of guy, made an unbelievable play in the SEC championship game, chasing down Bryce Young and punching the ball out from behind. Talked to him at the Senior Bowl. Just has good presence about him. He's kind of got that Nacho like energy, and he's the jokester guy. He's the funny. He said somebody asked him or heard a question. They said, "Who's the funniest guy that in this locker room with the Senior Bowl?" And he's like, "Me, of course. Like I always am." And he's just kind of one of those guys with that personality that I think would fit really well in the Bucs locker room. And so he's a player I'd be super intrigued by, even at 27. I need to watch more. I watched 2 games and definitely a good player. Not like, again, there's a player too where you're like, okay, that can be better, but not the biggest or longest defensive tackle. Is shorter, a little bit shorter arms, but plays with good first step, good energy. I think he's got better side-to-side ability than Jordan Davis. So you can see there's a future for him as a pass rusher. At a good week in the Senior Bowl, going to be a good run defending player and can fit in pretty much any scheme and against any scheme. I don't think there's really limitations with him athletically to that degree where it would be like,
300 pounds. And I think that's important for Buck fans to keep in mind is again, Khalil Davis was undersized at 300 pounds, right? I mean, he was like, I think Benning Potawahi is kind of around 300 now. He got his weight up a little bit, but when you look at guys like DeMarvin Leal, I mean, he's 290 pounds. And even the same thing with Perion Winfrey, who, and I saw a comment in there, about Winfrey. Winfrey was killing at the Senior Bowl. Listen, I went back and watched the practice footage as well as the game itself. Outside of Zion Johnson, there really wasn't a lot of good offensive line talent in this year's draft, and
a lot of developmental guys.
Yes, and I think that boosted artificially some of the stock with some of these guys. I watched Perion Winfrey a lot at Oklahoma over the last 2 years. He kind of came in as a JUCO transfer and he had half a sack in 2020, had 5.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble this past year. That play kind of elevated his stock a little bit, earned him a spot in the Senior Bowl, but he's not a big guy. He's about 290 pounds again. And I'm just not sure about the Bucs fit. Like I want to like him. He's got long arms, like you mentioned. He's got very narrow shoulders. He's got a weird kind of build. And I think that he and DeMarvin Leal kind of like in that same class, although to his credit, Perion Winfrey is a much better run defender than DeMarvin Leal is. I don't think Leal is a good Buccaneer fit. He played a lot really at defensive end. He's almost like a Marlon Davidson player, right? Where he's too big to play on the outside at the next level because he's just not that quick.
Get killed on the inside by
get killed on the inside.
power
Exactly.
guys. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, those guys are hard. They've had a hard time those oversized edge guys in the NFL have had a hard time transitioning to the NFL. We need to learn that lesson, I think. And I haven't watched his tape yet, so I'm not throwing him in. But when you're looking Marlon Davidson, seen it with Zach Allen, seen it with even Carlos Basham and some of those types.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, Boogie Basham was a guy too that we looked at last year. But the thing with when you're looking at Buccaneer fits, and even for a guy like Anthony Nelson, he's long and lean, right? He's 270 pounds, but he's a long and lean guy, kind of like in that Carl Nassib mold before him. But the Buccaneers for their edge guys, they want speed. That's why you got Shaq Barrett and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, and back in the day when he was fully healthy, Jason Pierre-Paul was that athletic freak off the edge. That's what they're looking for, not so much the bigger power players like the Logan Halls, because those guys have to move inside. And listen, a player like Will Golston, and you mentioned him at the top of the show, John, he has been all sort of different body sizes and types for all these different defensive schemes, whether it was Mike Smith back in the day or, whether it was under Greg Schiano. He's had to lose weight and gain weight. I think Will Golston's been down to 280. He's been up to 315. He's north of 300 pounds right now. And that's kind of like where you have to be an interior defensive lineman in this scheme. So when you're looking at guys like Buccaneer fans, like the Logan Halls and the Perrin Winfreys and stuff, if they're not 305 pounds or more, probably not a great fit. I wouldn't bet on them coming to the Bucs, John. Let's put it that way.
You wouldn't bet on them, Scott? Where would you bet? And what would you do if you were betting? Where would you go?
I would go to my bookie, John. That's exactly where I am going to go for the Super Bowl coming up, right? I mean, that's the next game on the docket now that we've gotten through the fraud of a Pro Bowl, as you accurately called it. So, listen, the Buccaneers might have missed a big game this year, but my bookie's double deposit bonus. Make sure that you won't. Sign up now at MyBookie and use the promo code PEWTER to have your first deposit matched instantly so you can get in on all the action of Super Bowl 56. The only way to watch the big game and to have it be even more fun is to get paid for doing it. And that's what MyBookie gives you. Gives you everything you need to do it. Double your initial deposit, and you can double your winnings right off the bat with the big game. Start off with the Super Bowl prop bets. They're always fun, right? Whether it's on or off the field, there's no shortage of wagers to choose from for the Super Bowl. So
Did we lose you? Might have lost Scott. Scott froze up. But MyBookie, go check it out at mybookie.ag. You can get a great opportunity to bet on the Super Bowl. It's great stuff for sure. So we lost Scott there for a second. Hopefully we can get him back here. But just to close out the show with these two thoughts to put a bow on some of this. Grady Jarrett situation I talked about. He could be available this offseason. We will look into that to see if that's, but the way his contract looks right now, it is a possibility that he could be available this offseason. So something to consider and think about when it comes to Grady Jarrett, it potentially being an option. And then the last thing I'll say is BJ Hill, just to close it out with this thought on BJ Hill. PFF's projection, 3 years, $26.25 million, $8.75 million per year, $14 million guaranteed. Could be doable. We'll see. It depends on what happens with other players, but it could be in the cards for the Bucs to be able to pick up a Grady Jarrett as well. So it's good stuff. There's options. Defensive tackle is going to be an interesting one, Scott. We'll see how it all plays out, obviously. Tomorrow, we talk about outside and inside linebackers on the podcast. And then on Wednesday, we'll talk about corners. And on Thursday, we'll talk about safeties. It's going to be great stuff. We're looking at all the groups, and we're going to do free agents that could be options, draft picks that could be options, and what the in-house options are as well. It's going to be fun stuff. We appreciate you all. Make sure you like the show before you exit. It helps out boost our YouTube SEO as well. Give us a like, share the link, spread the love. We appreciate you all. Thanks so much for listening to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.